Kickstart.
Hey, there we go. There we go. Good morning, everybody. It's Tim and Tom with another Tim Talk.
For the TimTomTalks Trans-Pacific podcast. We're uncertain how this is going to go, but that is our topic, uncertainty.
Don't say that. So yes, our topic is uncertainty. And look, this is the live broadcast, so you never know what you're going to get. And over the past couple of weeks with Tom, we've been doing some different stuff in this platform. And I've had small children making train noises in the background like I have now.
Yes,
and we've had technical failures. So
and there's our box of chocolates. Who knows what will be pulled out today?
So what we were thinking would be a useful way to talk about uncertainty and try and make it very practical, try and make it very real, is to talk about two topics that we're very much focused on and two topics that we're sort of right in the sandbox with at the moment, running challenges and engaging with group work with clients. Two topics that both sort of feed uncertainty, but also provide frameworks for starting to break uncertainty down and overcome it, essentially. And so we're going to talk about stress and emotional intelligence and how influencing them influences uncertainty. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Absolutely. One of the things I do want to say about uncertainty as it pertains to the human condition is some people are way more uncomfortable with uncertainty than others. Yeah. And that comfort level will come into play in your teams and the dynamics and those stress levels. And we'll cover some of that. But I wanted to start off with expect to have variable considerations and effects and behaviors based on the information that's available for certain personality traits.
No, it's such a good point because I think it's something that I would hope everybody can relate to, whether it's yourself personally or your observations of people around you, your family, your friendship group, and in your work circle. Some people just have no worries with uncertainty whatsoever. They're just like, yeah, well, as long as the sun goes down and comes up again, doesn't really matter what happens in between. Everybody really need everything to be scheduled out and to know exactly what the landscape looks like at all times. And I think that absolutely plays into stress and the way that the same event activates a different level of stress for different people. And of course, it plays into emotional intelligence, because if you've got all of your detectors on and you're sensing differing emotion from people as you're navigating uncertainty as a group, then you can orientate yourself differently to people depending on their needs, right?
Yeah, and when you're thinking about the future, when we're thinking in the very beginning of imagining, okay, is this project or is what we're going to be doing going to have uncertainty tied to it? Part of that plan should be bringing those people who are very uncomfortable with not knowing the outcome up to identifying what is going to be their comfort zone and how to move them through the process, because it's something that you can guarantee is going to be needed, especially for certain individuals.
Yeah. There's one word that's in my mind right now that I'd just like to share, which is hope. And I think, hope is very often something that's wrapped up with uncertainty. I think it's prevalent in my mind right now because I was coordinating a group I think we had about sort of 14, 15 people in a space yesterday who are coaches who are interested in working with their clients around the climate crisis. And one of the things that we spent a little bit of time unpacking was the need for a hopeful future as being kind of quintessential to a healthy human condition.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's an endorsement there from Dr. Tom. So yeah, like you have to deal with uncertainty, right? Uncertainty sits right here for a lot of people between them and a hopeful future. So the sooner you can break it open, not remove it, but just break it open so they can see that pathway, You're going to help them with their stress, and everything is going to start to feel that little bit more certain. So, Tom, let's talk specifically about stress, how stress is influenced by uncertainty, and how breaking stress down can help manage uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about uncertainty, for a lot of people, it's tied to change. It's tied to control. It's tied to demand, or the feelings of demand on their personal time, knowledge, skills, and all of that. And if they don't know what a project is, they don't know what they're going to need to give, and they often will be lack the ability to be able to gain commitments, because they do not want to be held accountable for something they can be uncertain about, because then they don't have any control. And why commit to something if you can't control it? So you'll run into probably a lot of passive aggressive behavior, probably a lot of maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And so you run into all of these counterproductive work behaviors when you're trying to come to consensus. What that does then is that raises the stress level, because it builds tension among the group. And therefore, defining what uncertainty is and is not in the group will help the team and the group to understand what is permissible in uncertainty and what isn't. For instance, timelines and when you're going to be delivering something. If certain ones will be, you'll be able to put down and say, yes, you're responsible for hitting this timeline because we have the information. You're not responsible for the outcome for this timeline unless you receive certain information by a certain time. And right now you're uncertain as to that. So we're not going to hold you accountable, but we are going to try and push to get that information as quickly as we can, but it is not your responsibility when the organization hasn't made a decision yet, right? So it's creating expectations and responsibilities around different areas that we know will be stressors in an uncertain plan. Tim, do you have any input on that?
No, yes, and maybe. No.
And that is completely clear and uncertain.
You see what I did there? No, in the from an academic standpoint and a theory of standpoint, I think you summarized a lot of stuff very concisely. Maybe in that I think that there's so much for me wrapped up in sort of speed of change, speed of trust, right? These two things. Like if you've got that, certainly that was what was going through my head as you were listening, but I'm going to say maybe because I'm not really sure if that's a sort of a clear link into what you were just describing. I think if organizations are focused simply on essentially their needs, their agenda, we have to get to this point by this moment in time, drive the change there, drive it as hard as we can. I think that's the kind of environment which is likely to induce a lot of uncertainty and high levels of stress. I think if you acknowledge the need to change, you acknowledge the destination of change, but you focus on the speed of trust, and that trust is essentially the vehicle that gets you through the change process most effectively. I think you can deal with a lot of uncertainty where you've got high levels of trust, right? Like we're in this together, we understand each other, we're all going to keep supporting each other, we trust these people to stick with us through the thick and thin. We'll go out into the murky world of uncertainty together, and we trust ourselves to get through it.
Well, I would like to interject something in that, because it's not always. You can have lack of trust in the organization, which is not ideal for a gazillion reasons, which some of them we covered last month. However, when the change and for instance, COVID last year, everybody had to go remote. That was just a hit everybody in the face, but you had to do it. You had to because you were forced. So that forced journey that everybody knew exactly that the end goal was we had to work remotely and we had to figure out some way how that's relevant. Everybody on the same path and understanding where they needed to go and the reason why, and that reason why was something they could buy into, can sometimes mitigate that trust, but it's trust. If you don't have trust, it's ultimately going to throw everything off the rails.
So I was going to also say yes, in that 100% have I seen and felt and experienced what you're describing, especially in large organizations, especially in command and control culture types. Yeah, like the message starts at the top, channel comes down. As it starts to spread out, the message gets diluted, and the relevance for people on the ground or really anywhere further down just starts to diminish, and leads to more questions and answers, but uncertainty either way increases. So let's talk about how you would work through a process of identifying stressors in order to start to sort of push away the fog of uncertainty. How does that help?
Well, for instance, what we do in the deconstructing stress process is first we identify and list what the stressors and tensions are. So if we're planning forward in an uncertain future, we would list what our potential ones are. If we're in an uncertain area, then we would list the current ones and list what we anticipate being additional problems. And then at that point, you walk through its effects. Is what type? Is it going to be a challenge type of stressor? Is it going to be a bad stressor? Is it going to be a good stressor? And then its importance level, its anxiety inducing levels that you anticipate, and its intensity level. And by working through those, you'll create a dynamic where you know what the dynamic's going to be, so you can create an action plan from that can help you create mitigating coping circumstances or ways of going about getting buy-in, communicating, building trust, or also going for outside support in areas where you think people don't have the skill set, knowledge, or capacity to be able to handle moving in an uncertain direction.
Yeah, and as somebody who has now both experienced the deconstructing stress process as a participant and worked in groups with other people who are going through, whether it's the full deconstructing stress process or the sort of reduced conquering stress challenge, like I have felt, and I can, sort of empathetically feel how just literally like building a list of everything you've got going on and everything that's stressing you out brings certainty back into the room.
Yeah, and it makes it
right. Like people are like,
and it makes it tangible, and it creates tangible points that you can manage to. Because when you just say it's uncertain, well, what does that mean? It's like saying I feel good. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah,
good to you and good to me are different things.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? And forcing ourselves to, or encouraging ourselves to be clearer about where we are and what we're experiencing, and creating then mechanisms to mitigate those will overall create a better experience for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to quickly talk for a couple of moments about two of the domains of emotional intelligence that I thought would be relevant today, sort of managing your own emotions and tuning into the emotions of others. So I think, it sounds very obvious, and it is obvious when you're in it, but the sooner you can sort of proactively call yourself out on it, the better, is that when you're dealing with uncertainty, you are going to be dealing with a lot of differing variable emotions in yourself. And then those are going to transmit and sort of impact on others who will also be experiencing heightened variability of emotion. Okay. And variability is the operative word, right? Your emotions are not going to be way up here, all out of whack all the time, but they are going to oscillate more so when you're going through uncertainty, especially if you are somebody who typically isn't optimistic about uncertainty, right?
Or comfortable with it.
Well, absolutely. I was trying to frame it more optimistically.
Well, no, because it's true. I mean, people can say they don't have a problem, but it makes them uncomfortable. Yeah. And that uncomfortable creates a tension, which then is anxiety inducing.
Exactly. So with EI, paying attention, being self-aware of your emotions, that's where emotional self-management begins. And then you can start to observe your emotions, record them, basically pay attention to when they occur, look for the causal triggers, and then start to apply, whatever sort of emotional regulating remedies is going to work for you. Whether it's to go and have some time, doing a mindfulness practice, or it's to go into motion, go for a walk, or it's to, sit and spend time with friends and trusted colleagues and sort of explore the emotions and stuff like that. All of those things, when you're dealing with uncertainty, will be helpful. And if you start to feel those heights of the variability coming in, recognizing that and activating one of those remedial effects will be really beneficial. Second thing, in terms of the observation of the emotions of others, this takes real time and skill in practice to develop an ability to recognize the people's emotions. Personally, I'm not so sure about whether or not this can't be done, as some people claim. It can't be done, or it can't be done anywhere near as efficiently in this environment, in the virtual environment. I think it's just another skill to practice. And certainly what I experience within our team is that we're actually now really, really good at tuning into each other's emotions in the virtual environment. And I think that helps that we're EI practitioners and we know a lot about what's going on. But I think it's also just creating the space to recognize signs and signals in other people, in tonal expression, in facial expression, in body language, in modality of participation, just how they're showing up. I think all of those markers will give you an indicator. Tom, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will say that in my experience, in my practical experience, what I have found is that people who are uncomfortable or less hopeful about uncertainty will, when confronted in a non-positive or constructive way, tend to go into fight or flight or frozen mode, because somebody has told them along the way that this is not the way to be, and this is a bad thing, and these people tend to it tends to affect their self-efficacy. So know that when you're addressing or bringing that up with someone, be sensitive, bottom line. And then I think we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, 100%. No, thank you. That's a really important point. And yes, we are going to wrap up. So just two things very quickly. Dr. Tom's Conquering Stress Challenge will be rerunning again in June. So check out the socials for 4i Group in order to tune in and engage with that. If you'd like, there's also going to be a webinar
for Australia, for the
B2B launch of Deconstructing Stress. And then we are about to launch our second challenge and our first challenge around emotional intelligence, which is coming next week. So again, check out the socials. There's lots of interest already. So if either of these two topics that we've discussed today are of interest, you can engage with them with us and get involved with this dancing guy over here. All right, on that note, signing off from Tim and Tom, and we'll see you again next week. And I'll do some dancing next.